Hey there YouTube, in this video we're going to look at two budget laptops, one brand new, the other used, and evaluate the pros and cons of each. We'll look at the screens, sound, performance, and more, so let's get started with an overview of both laptops to see how much we paid and what we got for our money. In the used corner, we have the Lenovo ThinkPad X250 coming in at $190 shipped from eBay. This is definitely a good deal, but not unrealistic, as you can find these laptops in this price range regularly. The X250 is a compact business laptop from 2015 featuring a 12.5-inch display and weighing in at a still pretty light 2.88 pounds. That 12-inch screen is an IPS display at 1366 by 768, slightly low resolution. The ThinkPad also offers downward-firing stereo speakers, an i5 5300U dual-core processor, 8GB of RAM, and a 120GB SSD. Not a bad little spec sheet for under $200. And as you can see, it's in pretty decent shape too for a used laptop. Representing new laptops in this comparison will be the Acer Aspire 5 Slim, which I just reviewed recently, as you can see linked in the description. This version of the Aspire 5 Slim features the 10th generation dual-core i3 processor, 4GB of RAM, 128GB SSD, and a 15-inch 1080p IPS display. This model is currently selling for $470 on Amazon. Not a bad price for a new laptop, but quite a bit more than our used ThinkPad. It's time to dive in and see how they compare. I'll start with the screen, because to me it's one of the most important factors in a laptop. The good news is that neither of these screens is bad. They're both matte IPS screens, so both have solid color reproduction and viewing angles. The screen on the X250 gets a bit brighter and the colors seem more saturated, but the lower resolution can really be a bummer when trying to get work done. There is a higher resolution display available for the X250, but they aren't easy to find. And while you can upgrade the screen on your own, the goal of this video is to compare these two notebooks as purchased. With that goal in mind, this is a really close decision in terms of which laptop has the better screen. I'm going to give it to the Aspire 5 Slim just due to the higher resolution, but like I said, this was close. Alright, let's talk about the speakers. Both of these laptops have downward firing speakers. Neither speaker system is very good, but the X250 definitely has better speakers. They get a little bit louder and they also have a bit more definition really through all different levels, the lows, the mids, and the highs. Here's a little sample, but like I said, neither laptop has great speakers. Let's move from output to input and talk about the keyboards. Unless you really need a number pad, this one is no contest. ThinkPads have among the best keyboards in the entire industry. The spacious layout, the ergonomically heaved keys, and the generous travel make the X250's keyboard a treat to type on. The Aspire 5's keyboard is not bad, but its smaller keys are a bit softer than I prefer, and the number pad layout is goofy, which throws off the whole package for me. Both keyboards are backlit and do a good job of it. The X250 does offer 2 stages of backlighting for what it's worth, compared to the single stage backlighting on the Aspire 5. While the X250's keyboard may have held up delightfully over the last 5 years, the trackpad has not, unfortunately. To start with the good, the X250's trackpad is relatively fully featured in terms of gesture support, offering features like 3-finger tapping to middle click, which is a must-have in my book. That wasn't always a guarantee with the good, because unfortunately the tracking is just plain not that precise, and the clicking action requires so much force that it can sometimes cause misclicks. Also, sorry ThinkPad fans, I'm not really a track point guy, so I don't have much to say about that. Jumping back to 2020, the trackpad on the Aspire is definitely better. It uses Windows Precision drivers, which is finally taking over on cheaper laptops now, is larger, and it's slightly more precise with a much more forgiving click. This is a pretty easy win for the Aspire, though it's still not an awesome trackpad. To continue trading wins, let's talk about build quality. This is probably the single biggest area where budget laptops skimp over more premium options, and therefore where used laptops can come out ahead. This duel is no exception. While the Aspire is impressively rigid for a budget laptop, it pales in comparison to the magnesium roll cage reinforced X250. There's a reason this version of the X250 would have cost more than twice what the Acer does. It's built to take a licking. Like I said, the Acer is much nicer in terms of build quality than a lot of cheap laptops I've used, but it's obviously not a premium item. One major caveat to this is that used laptops aren't always in good condition. Some people are all about driving a beater used laptop to save a few bucks, but I've never had to wait too long to find a deal on something in good shape. Battery life is actually interesting and can vary quite a bit. The X250 has a higher theoretical battery capacity than the Aspire. So why does the Aspire get 6 to 7 hours of basic use while the X250 only delivers 3 to 4? You guessed it. Well, you probably guessed it. The batteries are getting worn down from their maximum capacity due to years of use. To be fair, I've purchased used laptops before which had much lighter battery wear, but there are also plenty of examples of worse battery wear than this. Battery life is one of those areas that will almost always favor a new laptop. Now, one point of interest here is that the X250 does have a user-swappable battery, though they aren't particularly cheap, so you'd have to factor that into the total price. It does mean that the used laptop has potential to match or even beat the battery life of a new budget laptop, if you're willing to get some spare parts. I guess we'll call this a win for the Aspire, though we'll throw in an asterisk for the possibility of an upgrade on the X250. Port selection favors the modern laptop for sure. The Aspire offers HDMI, 3 USB-A ports, USB-C, Ethernet, and an audio jack. The ThinkPad does throw in an SD card slot, but only manages 2 USB-A ports, matches Ethernet and audio, then trades HDMI for mini DisplayPort and VGA. There's nothing wrong with mini DisplayPort, I guess, but I'd rather have HDMI, not to mention the extra USB ports. The SD card reader is a nice touch on the X250 though, and one reason it feels like a great little Swiss Army knife of a laptop. Performance is another mixed bag. Most of the components in these laptops are actually more or less a draw, but there are a couple of areas in where each finds a little space to distinguish itself, though perhaps with another asterisk thrown in. We'll give some love to 2020 first. While the Aspire's i3 CPU isn't really an upgrade over the older i5 and the ThinkPad, the upgraded Intel HD graphics are actually pretty significant. It can be really easy to overlook integrated graphics because we typically only think about them in a negative light, but meaningful improvements in 3D performance, and especially in video playback acceleration, can make integrated graphics upgrades actually pretty significant. The Aspire 5 Slim is noticeably smoother in 4K playback and has potential to give a decent boost in games as well. Why only potential? Glad you asked, since that leads me to the second performance difference between these machines: RAM. Despite coming in at $300 cheaper after tax and shipping, the X250 still came in with twice as much RAM as the Aspire, 8GB instead of 4GB. This is a huge advantage for performance, given how close everything else is. The Aspire's 4GB actually isn't as bad as people make it out to be, as long as you're sticking to basic usage, but it can get ugly in a hurry if you try to push it, or even get particularly demanding with productivity work. The ThinkPad's 8GB of RAM fares much better, handling productivity work and web browsing without ever breaking a sweat. Oh, remember that asterisk I mentioned that would be in this section? Here it is. Well, I did get more RAM out of the gate on that X250. 8GB is all that machine can handle, while the Aspire 5 Slim can be upgraded up to 40GB. Obviously, any upgrade will only add to the already higher cost of the Acer, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And that's a good lead-in to the final category, which is value. If we're talking pure dollars and cents, then value pretty obviously goes to the used laptop. Getting double the RAM at a $300 discount is hard to argue with, And let's not forget about the incredible build quality and keyboard. But money isn't the only thing with value. It can take time to find the right used laptop. This particular ThinkPad could easily have sold for $250 to $300, so I was lucky to catch it shortly after it was posted so I could pounce early. The good deals don't last long, so you have to keep an eye out regularly, which is more of a commitment than just looking something up on Amazon and buying it. Used laptops also have a higher potential for surprises and usually no warranty. The peace of mind that comes with a new laptop has its own value, which has to be considered when making a purchase. In conclusion, I'd say that if you're into tech and don't mind the possibility of troubleshooting your tech, a used laptop is always the way to go when you're buying a laptop on a budget. The ThinkPad X250 is only one example, as there are many alternatives with larger Full HD displays around the same price. To name another ThinkPad, the T450S is basically the 14-inch version of the X250 and has a beautiful 1080p screen. The one exception to the used laptop recommendation is if you really want that warranty and don't want to have to deal with replacing consumable parts, like if you're in a business. Outside of that, I'd say live a little and buy that awesome used ThinkPad, MacBook, or XPS of your dreams. Thanks for watching and have a great day.